Welcome to this episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast, the first podcast dedicated to helping civil engineering professionals succeed in work and life. I'm your host, James Taylor, and in this episode of the Civil Engineering Podcast, I will be talking with Dr. Bellandra Foster, president at BB Foster Consulting PC, about how engineers can achieve a balance between a professional success and personal fulfillment in their careers. We'll also discuss the importance of role identification in team dynamics and its impact on both project success and individual career development. Let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our civil engineering conversation of the week with Dr. Bellandra Foster. Dr. Bellandra, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Thank you. How are you? Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. We appreciate you taking the time today. We're going to jump into some questions here and want to get your feedback. But Dr. Foster, can you tell us how your journey in professional engineering has intersected with your personal aspirations for success?
Well, I graduated salutatorian of my class. I grew up in the Flint, Michigan area. And when I graduated, I was good at science and math, not a genius at it, but I was good at it. And it really wasn't something that was a huge struggle. So I, went to Michigan State University for my undergrad. And when I started undergrad, I actually was looking at mechanical, industrial, and civil. And one of the ways I made the decision was I looked at the coursework for each one. So I looked at mechanical. There was a couple classes that I said I'll never get through. Like one of them I remember to this day, it was called Vibrations of Machines. And that sounded like something that wasn't too interesting to me. And then industrial, I really liked the area, but I would have had to leave Michigan State because they did not have an industrial engineering program. And then, so I looked at civil and I really liked the classes, and a few of them were related to concrete design, structural design, building things, seeing things, grow from nothing to something. And that really intrigued me. So I made the decision to go into civil and with a focus on structural engineering. So that was my start. The first concept of engineering came actually from my parents, probably junior year or so, when I was looking at schools, looking at going to college, which was never a question in my home because my dad was an educator. So, but yeah, that was my intro to civil. And then that kind of led to me graduating. My goal was to graduate in 4 years from the engineering program that they always said was 5 years. So one of the first things that I did was sit down with my advisor at Michigan State. I remember to this day, his name was Scott Keeley, wonderful gentleman. And we developed a plan so I could graduate in 4 years. So that included, I worked some summers. I went to school the last summer after my junior year, going to senior year, but I came out in 4 years. I wasn't one.
That's one accomplishment right there.
Yeah, I didn't want to, be in school forever. But then, interestingly enough, I was looking at getting an MBA and actually had started an MBA program. And then I made the decision to go back and get my degree in, I was working by then. And let me go back. Personally, I actually looked at, when I graduated in structural, I actually had a few job offers. One of them was with Bechtel and one was with Procter & Gamble. The reason I chose the Bechtel one when I narrowed it down is because I didn't want, at my young 20-something-year-old age, I said, well, I don't know if, I like it or not. So if I don't ever work as a structural engineer, I'll never know if I like it. So that's why I chose to work for Bechtel. At that time, they had offices in Michigan. And so I was a structural engineer for them. I love the company. Bechtel was a great company to work for, but I did not care for the structural engineering. And maybe it was what I was doing at the time, but nothing against Bechtel. And that transitioned me into doing more infrastructure. So I took a position, got married, took a position with the Oakland County Road Commissions, as it was called at that time, in their road design division. So I was an assistant road design engineer. So that kind of transitioned me into infrastructure, and that would have been in the mid 80s. So that's a little bit.
I love it.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And you talk about a little bit about your journey and going through and the personal aspirations for, you found that you went for one thing and then tried something different. I want to talk a little bit about one of these things, about the secret place of importance, I believe is what you call it. And how has that played a role in your...
The secret place is tied to the spiritual aspect. I grew in a household that was, my dad was a Sunday school teacher and, went to church. And I just have always had, wanted to have, even as a child, a strong relationship with God. And that used to be when I wrote the book, For Love of Money, 7 Guidelines for Achieving Success in Your Home and Business. One of the chapters was related to have a conversation with God. But that has evolved into more, it's not necessarily always got to be a conversation, because what's in that is that one should learn, including, and especially myself, to do more listening than talking. So that secret place for me is where I have to get quiet and really hear the direction that I need to take. My parents passed away, fairly young. I didn't have children. My mother passed. And then my dad passed when I was just starting to gain some success as an entrepreneur. So it's always been very important to me to have that spiritual guidance and that discernment to know what direction to take in every aspect, whether it's in my home, with my marriage, and in my business. So that secret place is where I, at this point, as I got older, learned to get quiet and make sure I hear from God and knowing what direction I need to take for things. Yeah.
Yeah, and that listening part is tough. That silence, that listening, just in general, that's a really tough thing. Yeah. And so it sounds like you've kind of used that as your guide on where you're going with your professional and personal life.
I've gotten better with it as I get older, because and then learning to just have discernment and pray for discernment over pretty much anything, and I'm at a point now where, I have my business, but every client isn't meant for me, and I'm not meant for every client. And so I'm always, when things happen, or say we put in a bid or an opportunity and it doesn't, pan out, I'm thinking, I don't really go kicking doors down, anymore. And you treat things differently in your 20s and 30s as opposed to your 50s and 60s. So now it's like, my mind says more of maybe that one was not meant for me to have, because I don't know what was coming down the pipe. But a lot of times I'll do a lot of referrals. So, and it not necessarily the client is bad or anything. It's just this may be meant to bless somebody else. So that's what I try to do. And there's, a few companies that I was like, you know what? Or someone will come to me and say, hey, do you do this? One of the areas is surveying. I know surveying. I, study that in school, but my companies have never done surveying. But I have great companies that I know that do a good job at that. So I'll do a referral and, hey, give them the work, help them benefit from an opportunity. So basically, the bottom line is doing things for others that I would want someone to do for me. That's really put it in a nutshell.
I love it. Yeah, and that's great, right? That's the unselfishness of life, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's not all about us. Yeah. It's about others as well. What strategies do you recommend for someone identifying their passion and their purpose, especially when it comes to the field of engineering?
And a lot of it is, how the old saying, it's something that you do for free. There is some truth to that. I mean, of course, you can't continuously work for free because you have to make a living. But I'm at a point now where, early in my career, I was like, wow, is this really I like what I'm doing. But when I had my first business and then I moved out of Michigan and closed that business, I really questioned, man, is this really what I want to do? Because I saw some aspects of the industry that really kind of jaded me. And I thought, somewhat of a lack of support, like we were just talking about, hey, helping or reciprocating.
Right.
A lot of times that was not returning. And we go through life, and a lot of times there are injustices and wrongdoings, but you have to find a way to get through it. And some things that happened to my business and to me, really, hey, they weren't right, but you have to find a way to get through it. And that's where it became that going to the secret place, not holding the grudge, not being upset, but you find a way to move on. So in that vein, there were times I was like, maybe I want to, look at this or look at this aspect. But then there was something that brought me back in. I met some great people down here in North Carolina that asked me to manage a program, and that brought me back into the engineering. So that things like that tell me, and then doing the work and enjoying the work. But now I'm at a phase where it's like people, talk about retirement, and I'm like, well, as long as I enjoy what I'm doing, I don't have a desire to retire, because retire and do what?
Right.
So that's one big aspect for me, is that when you're passionate about something and you feel like it's your purpose, and then things have panned out where in 2022, I was selected as the Michigan State University Civil and Environmental Engineering Distinguished Alumni, and then various other awards. So that kind of gives me the indication, what, that Lord, this was the right choice, because things like that, if you're not doing what you're meant to do in life, I don't believe things like that happen,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you talk about that achievement. I mean, and by the way, not a small achievement. That's a huge achievement, and congratulations on that.
And
First off,
recognized by your peers. That is like huge. It was like huge for me. When I got the call, I was like, wow.
So with that, you talked a little bit about the passion and the purpose and all that stuff, but understanding your own passion and purpose, how has that guided you through your career decisions and achievements like you just mentioned? How has that happened?
Know my passion. Well, part of it is when you know your passion, purpose, and you feel like you're going in the direction that is your purpose in life or what you're destined to do. We're all here destined to do something. It's just a matter of if we carry it out, that destiny. And what our destiny is, I'm a true believer that God is going to equip us to carry it out in the manner that it should be carried out. So that all ties together for me, is that, and so if you're good at what you do, then from that, you can mentor other people, you can coach other people, you can be, as they say, role model or example. And so my goal has always been, whether it's in business or personal life, to always lead a life that's an example. None of us are perfect, but I'm always striving to be, to lead an example and not take someone, see something I'm doing and that will mislead someone else, or deceive them into doing something that's wrong, so I'm always kind of cognizant of that. I mean, like I said, none of us are going to walk through this thing perfectly, but we do the best we can, and I'm honest with people. Like right now, I went, became a certified coach, ICF certified coach, and people ask about coaching. Right now, I'm led to, I coach people, but I do it pro bono, but it has to be someone where it's discerned that this person is to be coached, because if you don't do that, then you'll be coaching people who don't value it. Right. It's got to be someone who values it, because a lot of times people don't value something if they're not paying for it. So I have to be very cognizant of that too. So I typically don't do mentoring, but I actually do more coaching, and there is a difference, but I actually do more coaching, because coaching ties that individual to action steps and leading themselves based on a plan that we develop together, but they have to do the work, right?
Right.
And I can't tell them or do the work for them, because then they won't value it. I mean, you have to say, this is what I'm going to do, and then you carry it out, Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about coaching in general and the importance behind it? I know this wasn't a question that we threw out to you, but the passion I can tell is there about coaching and the importance of it from both sides of being a coach, but also having a coach. Can you talk a little bit about
throughout my career? I never really had a coach, but I had mentors, and the people that I had as mentors, I don't even think they realized they were mentors. I may not have even realized, but so I really, I have the certification in coaching, but it probably is tied to it. There is some mentoring in that, because the thing people typically know of is the mentoring. So with the coaching, when I coach someone, and my specialty areas that I really like to consider more like small business coaching, life transition, which is, hey, going from working in industry for someone to having your own business. That's a transition, right? Or going from, having children in the home to, I have my own business. I'm used to doing everything, but now I don't.
Right.
And then I've done some executive coaching too. So all that being said, with the coaching, I like coaching because, like I said, it does have a high level of accountability for that individual, the coachee, to work. You work with them, develop action steps, but they have to carry out and do the work. So when you're coaching someone, they have to be willing to do the work. So when I coach, it's like, okay, this is the next steps. What is your goal? What are we going to talk about today? How are we going to get you there? But the onus of doing the work is on you. We're just developing the plan, So everyone, they have to have skin in the game because it has to be worth more to them than it does to you. Just like in the world, you can want something for someone so bad, but if they don't want it more for themselves, it's not going to happen.
There's nothing you can do, right?
It's a tough lesson.
Yep.
It really is, So, and the same with coaching, So the people that come to me, they're serious about what they want to do. And if you're not, it's not going to really be successful because you're not going to carry out the steps to get where you said you want to go.
Exactly. I love hearing that difference because I think a lot of times mentoring and coaching get used interchangeably.
Yep.
And they're not really, there is a difference between the two.
Yep.
And I appreciate you elaborating on that a little bit and providing some clarification on that. So we talked about the secret place aspect and I want to talk another one of your key areas of playing for the home team. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you and how does this concept apply in the professional context, and then even in the personal context?
Yeah, when I wrote my book, the For Love of Money book in 2008, my sons were young. And I started my first business, actually, let me see, well, even one, they were like young toddlers, really young. But my goal was always to not be a stay-at-home mom necessarily, nothing against that, but I wanted to be able to work, but I want to be there and raise my children. So it's like, that's tough. Families, I'm not that's going to even say women, but families know that's tough, And at the time, my mother was deceased. I really didn't have a lot of extended family around. And my two sisters, they were, raising their own families. And one of them was actually out of state. And so, and my brother was deceased because I had a brother who was a veteran, and about 20 years after, actually it was more like 15 years, he was actually murdered, so I didn't have a lot of extended family. So it was sort of a situation where it's like, I want to be at home, I want to raise my children, I want to be able to take them to school, make them breakfast, things like that, and they're 3 years apart. So actually when I started my first business, my oldest son was probably about 3, okay? So what I did was, and that's a story in itself, when I left the city of Atlanta as director of highways and streets, shortly after that, I started my PhD. But then I decided, I really want to go forth because I had, quite a few years of experience by then. And then I got a call from a gentleman that I had worked with when I was an employee at Michigan Department of Transportation. And he said, at the time I had my PE license, which was my professional engineering license. I had gone through undergrad, had passed the part 2 of the PE exam the first time, so I had that. And then I had my master's too. So he called and he said, Bellandra, he said, a lot of the companies were doing inspection services, but none of the companies look like me. None of those companies look like me. They were not minority companies that were getting any of that work, at the time. So he said, you might want to look at, and the gentleman that I worked with, they had a big early out retirement. He said, you might want to consider looking at, if you can get some work in inspection. You have all the qualifications, you have your PE license, you have all this. And so I did that. And that was the inroad to starting my business. And these 4 gentlemen that I had worked with, they were like, Bellandra, we're going to come work for you to help you be successful. Awesome. And that's what that was the start of it. So that was kind of like the inroad. And I think, did I ask the question? I want to make sure I did, the home team. So that was the inroad to starting the business, right? But then, as any entrepreneur knows, there's a lot of work to start a business. Yeah. So I always had a home office. So I could, be there with the kids. And then when they went to bed, I mean, I would, work, and I work while they were at school at some points went to daycare was only like a couple of days a week. So that's how I organized it, where I always had a home office. But interestingly enough, home offices are popular now. But back then, I really kind of got like side looks like, you really don't have a business if you work out of your home. But I have always had a home office since day one. Even when I've had outside offices, like right now I have an outside office, and like everybody else, we work from our home office more. Mm-hmm. My home office has always been equipped, everything I need, But that's how I started in playing for the home team, tying to, I want to make my home successful. But I want my business to be successful. So my business, probably at that point, I didn't grow like other people are, able, put all in with the business and that time factor that takes. I was not able to do that because I still had to maintain the priority that was set for me, which is maintaining my physical, emotional health, my marriage, my family, and then the business after that. So I was like, and that was tied to, I have to maintain that priority because I always have to play for the home team. And at this point, the home team needs more.
Right.
As opposed to the business team.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's obviously a tough decision as well, because especially when you're starting a business, trying to grow that and making sure that you're doing the right things, but also identifying the fact that home team. Yeah.
And it was important for me. I wanted to, be there in the morning because my husband, he worked and he was with the auto industry, but his job was not flexible. He was at work at like 7 and off at 4 or 5, so it wasn't like, that availability wasn't there. So, but it was a pleasure. I'm not saying it was ever a burden. It was, but it is a lot of organization has to be involved in that. But that was what was important to me. And as we go through life, things transition. Then they got older and, and then they I would still take them to school. And then it got to the point later, my older son, he's driving to school. So that was a season, but that was important to me. So you always have to look at what is your priority, and how you carry out that priority is based on, many people may not want to face this, but that's what's important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Where you spend your time is where your priority goes. As someone who has been in leadership roles, and I think you kind of talked a little bit about this, but what are some often overlooked costs of being the boss?
Lack of work-life balance is a big one. And some people use the buzzword is balance, but I'm going to tie it back to what I just said. The bigger thing for me was lack of work-life priority.
Right.
That was what I had to do, is if I'm saying that this is a priority, my life and my time needs to look like that's a priority. And my marriage is always important. This year, my husband and I celebrated 39 years. We've been married way over half our lifetime. So, but that was important to us, and, so work-life balance, but more intently work-life priority.
So talk a little bit about that, the importance of family and self-time for professionals in high-stress careers, which a lot of engineers, they're in high-stress careers. And you talked about the priorities of making the family a priority during those seasons. But what's that importance of family and self-time? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
A lot of that, as I get older, and the things that I focused on that bothered me or caused stress, which is a killer, because there were some illnesses I had that I definitely can attribute to stress. So I caution everybody in that. But it's tied to, the older I get, you have to get to a point where you don't let certain people in or certain issues or certain drama. You have to release yourself from that and say it's okay. And no is not a dirty word. I had to learn to say in a professional, kind way, sometime strongly, no, I'm unable to do that.
Yeah.
And then certain people, you have to, it's not that you don't love them. It's not that you don't care about them. It's not that, you have any ill will against them. But if you have someone in your life that when they walk through the room, you get a sickening feeling.
Yeah.
And
right.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you walk in and it's like all the air gets sucked out of the room
right.
because it just,
your body, like I say, it tightens up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just be cautious of that. And those are people, it's like nothing against them, but all relationships aren't necessarily meant for a lifetime. Some are meant for a season. And I had to learn that that's okay. It's okay. It's not that I don't love you. It's not that I won't pray for you. It's not that I don't care about you. But this relationship has run its course.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of times it's because of, maybe that stress that it brings. And it can be not necessarily a relationship with a person, but it can be a relationship with a company that works for you or you work for them.
Yep.
It's time to go. You have to release yourself from that and tell yourself it's okay, to do that. And when I did that, it was like you almost like feel your shoulders drop. And then, but the key to that, there's one big key. When I moved to North Carolina, I'm telling you, the Holy Spirit told me, and it was clear, because I was like, that's not some Latin. It was, I moved you out to a safe place. Don't go back and get them. And at the time, I didn't really regret, but later on, I was like, I know exactly what that was, because some of the people that cause the most stress or lack of support, which is stress, right?
Yeah.
Lack of support can be stress. They want to come back in. What are you doing now? What are you doing? Nope. Yeah. I was very kind, but it's like, no, not interested in that relationship. Have nothing against you. If I saw you, I speak, say hello, but that relationship has run its course.
Yeah. That door got shut. Don't open it back up.
Exactly.
Yep, exactly. Yep. I got to tell you, I've really enjoyed our conversation. What final advice would you give to our listeners who aspire to achieve success in both their professional and personal lives?
Develop a priority for yourself, what's important to you, and stick with it. And every morning, what I try to do is calm myself and pray for guidance throughout the day, pray for loved ones, family, and then that nothing crosses my path that will steal my joy.
Yes.
Sometimes it's hard, but that's my prayer every morning. Is a thankful thank you for everything, but give me discernment and help me that nothing crosses my path that will steal my because things will happen in the morning that it messes up your whole day. I hate that.
Yep. Yeah, wow, that's such great advice. I really appreciate you sharing about that and really appreciate all that you've provided for us today, the wisdom that you've been able to share.
Thank you so much for contacting me. I really appreciate it this time.
All right, now it's time for our CE Hot Seat segment of the week with Dr. Bellandra Foster. Welcome to the hot seat. Are you ready to go?
Yes.
All right. Number one, do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, specific morning ritual, lunchtime ritual, things that you do consistently on a daily basis that contribute to you being a successful professional?
Get up in the morning, make sure I say some type of scripture or a small prayer and pray for discernment and joy throughout the day and discernment for whatever crosses my path.
What is one book that you recommend to engineers regularly, or just one book that you have found to be extremely helpful in your professional and or your personal development? Bible
and scripture, because the Bible has many books. Like if I'm having issues with wisdom, I'll try to find something in Proverbs. So yeah. But I've read many books, and on my personal note, I really one of the books I've read is a lot history related, nonfiction, so I like true stories, things like that. Yeah. So, but one of the main ones is because within that, I can pretty much find an answer to anything I need to get an answer to.
Great answer. I love it. Great answer. Thinking back on your managers of the past, picture your favorite manager or managers and what made them your favorite.
Oh man, there's been a few. Okay. So one was one who ended up mentoring. He was one of the first African-American region engineers, district engineers from Michigan Department of Transportation. His name was Alfonso Williams. Very kind gentleman that I will never forget. And the other one was Mayor Maynard Jackson. He was the mayor of Atlanta. I was selected and appointed as director of highways and streets. He was one of the best leaders that I ever had an opportunity to work under and envision under his leadership. And the programs and plans that he put in place are still having an effect to this day, 30, 40 years later.
I've got one final question, and that is the critical civil engineering career elevator advice question. And so what this is if you've got into an elevator with a civil engineering student and had about, let's say, 30 to 40 seconds with them to give them some career advice, what would that be?
If you're looking at civil engineering, I would recommend, especially if you're looking at just entering into it, looking at it, there's various aspects, areas under that umbrella of civil. Look at the different coursework types and what those courses entail and determine what you believe that you could do as a career and love for the long term.
Great advice. Great advice. I got to tell you, I think I could talk to you for a really long time, but I know your time is valuable. Thank you so much, Dr. Foster, for joining me today. Can you tell our listeners a little bit of how they can connect with you?
My website is bbfosterconsulting.com, www.bbfosterconsulting.com. And my email is bbf, my initials, at bbfosterconsulting.com.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the time.
I appreciate you asking me, and have a wonderful holiday. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please remember you can find the show notes for this episode at civilengineeringpodcast.com. There you will find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your civil engineering endeavors.